I recently faced my own worst nightmare. The HOA president, Eleanor Vance, filed a lawsuit to force me into her HOA, even though my land isn't even part of it. And her excuse? She waved a 30-year-old expansion map and said I technically belonged to them. The funny thing is, the only thing that got destroyed that day was her entire case, in under 3 minutes. Let me start from the beginning. The first time I laid eyes on Eleanor Vance, she was marching up my driveway like she was invading Poland. My wife, Clara, and I had just finished the last board on our porch railing. We were sitting in 2 worn-out rocking chairs, mugs of coffee warming our hands, watching the morning mist burn off the pines. This was it. This was the dream. 2 years of saving every dime. 1 year of busting my hump on weekends and evenings, turning a patch of forgotten woods into our own little slice of heaven. No neighbors breathing down our necks. No traffic. Just the sound of the wind and the birds. Or so I thought. Eleanor wore a pastel pink pantsuit that screamed, "I have an opinion about your life choices." Her hair was sprayed into a helmet that could probably deflect small arms fire. She brandished a freshly stamped lawsuit packet marked HOA lawsuit. "Good morning," she said, but it sounded more like an accusation. She stopped at the bottom of our new porch steps, her eyes scanning everything, judging everything. Her gaze lingered on my fire pit, a ring of stones I'd set myself. Then it swept over the dense woods that surrounded our cabin. "I'm Eleanor Vance, president of the High Pines Homeowners Association." She said president, the way a king might say king. I took a slow sip of my coffee. I'm not a patient man by nature. Years of running construction crews taught me that direct is always best. "That's nice," I said. "This is my property. What can I do for you?" She gave a tight, unpleasant smile. "Well, that's just it. It's your property, yes, but it's also within the High Pines Community Charter." She tapped her clipboard, "which means it's subject to our covenants and bylaws. I've already noted 2 violations this morning." I glanced at Clara. Her expression was calm, but I could see the storm gathering in her eyes. Clara is the clever one, the thinker. I'm the doer. And right now, what I wanted to do was tell this woman exactly where she could file her clipboard, but I held my tongue, barely. "Violations?" I asked, my voice flat. "We haven't even been here a month. The rules don't take holidays, mister." She paused, waiting for my name. "Don't need it," I said. "And you're trespassing. Our land isn't part of any HOA." A little flicker of something nasty crossed her face. It was the look of a person who had never been told no in her entire life and didn't care for the experience. "I think you'll find that it is," she chirped, her voice dripping with false sweetness. According to the Community Expansion Map of 1996, this parcel was absorbed. Now, about the violations. First, your fire pit. It's an unapproved structure. All fire features must be gas-powered and enclosed in a board-approved decorative housing. She said decorative housing, like it was the most important phrase in the English language. Second, she continued, waving a dismissive hand at the ancient forest around us. The rule book clearly states a property must maintain a park-like appearance. This is just wild. It's an overabundance of trees. You'll need to have at least 40% of them cleared to allow for proper sightlines. I actually laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the kind of laugh that comes just before things get loud. "You want me to cut down my trees? The trees that were here 100 years before your stupid HOA ever existed? Are you out of your mind?" Clara put a hand on my arm. "Honey," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "To Eleanor," she said, "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake. When we bought this land, we did a thorough title search. There are no covenants, no HOA ties whatsoever. We were very specific about that." Eleanor's eyes narrowed into little slits. She looked Clara up and down, dismissing her with a single glance. "Mistakes were made, dear, but not by the association. Probably an oversight by your realtor. It happens. But ignorance of the law is no excuse." She pulled a pastel pink slip of paper from her clipboard and held it out. It was a formal violation notice. "You have 30 days to remedy these issues. After that, daily fines will begin to accrue. Welcome to the neighborhood." I didn't take the paper. I stood up, the rocking chair groaning in protest. I'm not a huge guy, but I'm solid, and I can be intimidating when I need to be. I walked to the edge of the porch, looking down at her. "I'm going to say this once. Get off my land. You are not welcome here." Your fake rules are not welcome here, and if you ever come back, I'll have you cited for trespassing." She didn't flinch. That's the thing about bullies. They're so wrapped up in their own power, they can't imagine anyone actually pushing back. She just smirked, placing the pink slip on the bottom step. "The association has rights, sir. We have the right to inspect properties to ensure compliance. We have the right to enforce our community standards. You can huff and puff all you want, but you will comply. Everyone does. Eventually." She turned on her heel and goose-stepped her way back down my driveway, her posture rigid with self-importance. Clara came and stood next to me, wrapping an arm around my waist. We watched until her car disappeared down the dirt road. The pink slip on the step seemed to glow with a sickly light. "What a miserable woman," Clara breathed. "She's more than miserable, Ames," I said, feeling a hot anger coiling in my gut. "She's a tyrant, and she just declared war." I looked at the notice, then back at the perfect, quiet woods she wanted to destroy. This was my home, our home. I had built it with my own 2 hands to be a fortress against people exactly like her. And now she was standing at the gate, demanding I hand over the keys. It wasn't just about trees or a fire pit. It was about control. She wanted to own us. A cold resolve settled over me, pushing the hot anger aside. She had no idea who she was dealing with. She saw a guy in a flannel shirt and work boots and assumed she could roll right over me. She was about to find out how stubborn I could be when protecting my own. This wasn't over. This was the first shot in a battle she had no idea she was about to lose. I just didn't know yet how ugly that battle was going to get. This cabin wasn't just a house to me. It was a promise I had made to myself a long time ago. I grew up in the city, in a cramped apartment where the only view was a brick wall and the only nature was the weeds growing through the cracks in the sidewalk. I spent my whole life dreaming of space, of quiet, of the smell of pine needles after it rains. After I met Clara, that dream became our dream. She was a city girl, too, but she had the soul of a country woman. She understood my need for a place where we could finally breathe. When we finally had enough for a down payment, we didn't look for a house. We looked for land. We found this 5-acre parcel tucked away at the end of a long dirt road, miles from the nearest town. It was perfect. It was being sold by an old man named Mr. Fitzwilliam, a farmer whose family had owned the land for generations. He was a kind, quiet man with eyes that had seen a lot of seasons come and go. When we walked the property line with him, I asked him straight up about the fancy new development down the road, the one with the big sign that said High Pines Estates. "Oh, them?" he'd said with a little chuckle. "Don't you worry about them. This land ain't part of that. Never has been, never will be. Made sure of that myself a long time ago." We took him at his word, but Clara, being Clara, made sure the title company checked and double-checked. The report came back clean as a whistle. No liens, no covenants, no HOA. The land was free and clear, so we bought it. And for a year, I poured all my sweat and skill into building our home from the ground up. I milled some of the lumber myself from fallen trees on the property. Every nail, every board, every wire was placed by my own hands. Clara was right there with me, staining wood, painting walls, and keeping me sane when a measurement was off or a delivery was late. The first 6 months we lived there were pure bliss. We got our rhythm. I'd wake up early, drink my coffee on the porch, and listen to the world come alive. Clara would plant her garden, her hands covered in dirt, a happy smile on her face. We were finally home. We'd met a few of the people from down the road. One of them was a guy named Leo who lived just inside the official entrance to High Pines. He was a quirky fellow, a retired IT guy who now spent his days bird-watching and cataloging conspiracy theories. The first time he came over, he looked at our place with a kind of awe. "Man, you guys got the jackpot," he'd said, sipping the beer I gave him. "You're outside the blast radius." "The blast radius?" Clara had asked. Leo nodded grimly. "Queen Eleanor the Vancenator. She runs the HOA like it's her own personal North Korea. Last week, I got a fine because my garden gnome was, and I quote, of a whimsical nature not in keeping with the community's aesthetic standards." "A garden gnome, man." He shook his head. "She's a terror, but you guys are safe up here. She can't touch you." We'd laughed about it then. It sounded absurd, like something out of a comedy movie, a woman who waged war on garden gnomes. It was funny because it wasn't our problem. It was just a story about the crazy neighbors down the hill. We were in our fortress, safe and sound. The life we were fighting to protect was this peace. It was the freedom to have a fire pit, to let the trees grow wild, to put 100 tacky garden gnomes on the lawn if we felt like it. It was the principle of being left alone. It was the promise I had made to myself and to Clara that we would finally have a place that was truly ours, governed only by our own rules. That first encounter cracked the foundation of our quiet dream. After Eleanor strutted off, Clara and I spent the evening burning her pink violation slip in our very much unapproved fire pit. A tiny rebellion that felt huge. We told ourselves she'd back down once she saw we wouldn't. We were dead wrong. At dawn, a deputy rolled up, white gloves gripping a thick, creamstock envelope stamped with an upscale law firm crest and ominously addressed to the occupants. Inside, a full civil complaint. 48 pages of HOA fury, bound like a phone book. 24 hours later, we were in Judge Albright's courtroom. 3 minutes after she took the bench, her gavel cracked once more, and the case was dead on arrival. I held it in my hand, feeling the weight of it. It felt heavy, like it was filled with more than just paper. Clara saw it, and her face went pale. "That's from her lawyers, isn't it?" she said. It wasn't a question. We both knew. The piece was over. The opening shots had been fired, and the enemy was escalating. We were no longer just living our dream. We were defending it. I stared at the envelope, the sharp, neat lines of the law firm's logo looking completely alien in our rustic home. For the first time, a sliver of real doubt crept in. We had the truth on our side, but she had lawyers and a rulebook. I didn't know then what I know now. That was a fight we couldn't afford to lose, because we were about to find out just what Eleanor Vance was truly capable of. I slit the envelope open with my pocket knife, my hand steadier than I felt. Inside was a thick stack of papers dense with legal jargon that was clearly designed to intimidate and confuse. But Clara had spent years working for lawyers. She took the papers from me, her eyes narrowing as she began to read. I watched her face, seeing the flicker of disbelief turn into cold, hard anger. I paced the floor of our living room, the beautiful wood floors I had installed and finished myself, now feeling like the floor of a cage. "What is it?" I finally asked, unable to stand the silence any longer. "What does the damn thing say?" She looked up, her knuckles white where she gripped the pages. "It's a formal notice of annexation," she said, her voice tight. "They're claiming that a community expansion clause from 1996 was invoked at the last board meeting. They've officially redrawn the High Pines boundaries to include our parcel." My blood ran cold. They can't do that, can they? Just decide to swallow up our land. "According to this, they can," she said, flipping through the pages. "And it gets worse. They're billing us for 5 years of retroactive HOA dues, plus interest and penalties for non-payment. And here's a list of all the initial fines from Eleanor's little visit." She pushed a page across the table to me. It was an itemized list of our supposed crimes. Unapproved fire feature, $500. Overgrown natural landscape, $1,000. Non-conforming exterior siding. That was the beautiful cedar I'd chosen, $750. The total, including the back dues, is over $9,000. I stared at the number. $9,000. It was an impossible sum, a ransom note disguised as a legal document. It wasn't about the money. It was about the audacity, the sheer, unmitigated gall of this woman to think she could just waltz in and steal our life from us. This was no longer a simple dispute. This wasn't a misunderstanding about a property line. This was a declaration of war. My hot-headed nature, the one I usually tried to keep a lid on, came roaring to the surface. I wanted to drive down to her perfectly manicured house and tell her exactly what I thought of her and her fake laws. "I'm going to kill her," I muttered, clenching my fists. "No, you're not," Clara said, her voice cutting through my rage. She stood up and came over to me, putting her hands on my shoulders. She was furious, too. I could see it in the fierce set of her jaw, but her anger was a focused beam of light. Mine was a forest fire. "Listen to me," she said. "This is what she wants. She wants you to get angry. She wants you to yell and scream and do something stupid so she can play the victim and call the cops. We are not going to play her game. So what do we do, Clara? Just roll over and write her a check? Let her tell us what color we can paint our own front door." "Never," she said, and for a second, she looked more dangerous than I felt. "We fight, but we fight smart. This whole thing stinks. This community expansion clause, it sounds made up. And annexing property without the owner's consent? That can't be legal. I'm going to spend tomorrow at the county records office. I'm going to pull every document related to High Pines and our land that has ever been filed. Her tactical mind was already working, seeing the chessboard while I was still just seeing red. I took a deep breath, trying to let her calm strength soothe my own ragged edges. She was right. Flying off the handle was a losing move. This woman, Eleanor, she was a predator. She thrived on weakness and fear. We couldn't show her any. Okay, I said, my voice low. Okay, you handle the paper. I'll handle the ground. The next day, while Clara went to town to dig through dusty files, I went to work fortifying our home. I wasn't just a builder. I had a fair bit of experience with security systems from my commercial jobs. I bought a set of high-end trail cameras, the kind that are motion activated and have night vision. I placed them strategically all over our property, hidden in the dense woods, watching our driveway, our porch, our well house. If a mouse so much as sneezed on my land, I was going to have a high-definition picture of it. This was a fundamental shift. Before, we were just living. Now, we were defending. The joy and peace of our home had been tainted by a sense of being under siege. Every creak of the house at night made me jump. Every car that drove down the dirt road made me look out the window. Eleanor Vance had done more than just send us a letter. She had invaded our sense of safety. She had stolen our peace of mind. That evening, Clara came back from the county office with a stack of photocopies and a grim look on her face. It's weird, she said. The 1996 map she mentioned is on file. It does look like it includes our land, but the paperwork around it is sloppy. It's not right. Sloppy how? I don't know yet, she admitted. It just feels off, like it was filed in a hurry. We knew we were in for a long, hard fight. This woman had embedded her power into the official records, twisting the law to suit her own needs. She wasn't just some busybody with a clipboard anymore. She was a sophisticated enemy with the full weight of a legal structure, however flimsy, behind her. I looked at the trail camera boxes on the table, then at the pile of legal documents Clara had brought home. This was our life now, gathering evidence, looking for weaknesses, preparing for the next attack. I looked at Clara, her face tired but determined in the lamplight. My protective instincts flared up, stronger than ever. This woman was not just threatening our property. She was threatening my wife's happiness and security, and that was a line that could not be crossed. She picked the wrong fight, I said, my voice quiet but full of conviction. She thinks she's dealing with a couple of pushovers. She's about to find out she messed with the wrong guy and his very, very clever wife. The first drone appeared 3 days later. It was a high-pitched whine that cut through the morning quiet, sounding like a giant, angry mosquito. I was on the porch, and I saw it hovering just at the edge of my property line, a little white spider in the sky. It zipped back and forth, its camera lens pointing directly at our house. It was a brazen, arrogant act of intimidation. Eleanor was telling us she was watching, always watching. My first instinct was to grab a rock. My second, better instinct was to smile and wave right at the camera. Then I walked back inside and called the sheriff's department to report a peeping Tom. A deputy came out, a young guy who looked bored. I explained the situation, the harassment, the drone. He sighed. Sir, as long as the drone is flying over public airspace or their own property, there's not much we can do. It becomes a civil matter. It's spying on my wife? I said, my voice hard. When does that become a criminal matter? Unless you can prove it's looking into your windows with the intent to spy, my hands are tied, he said, and you could tell he was just reciting a script. It's an HOA dispute. You'll have to take it up with them. He left, and the drone was back an hour later. That night, I rigged up a high-pressure nozzle on our garden hose. The next time it dipped low over my driveway, I let it have it. The blast of water sent it spiraling, and it retreated back toward the High Pines kingdom like a wounded bird. It was a small victory, but it felt good. The escalation came faster than I expected. The following night, I went out to get the mail and found our well pump was silent. The pressure gauge read 0. I'm handy with machines, so I opened up the access panel. It didn't take long to find the problem. Someone had poured sand into the motor's air intake. It was a deliberate act of sabotage. It wasn't just a threat anymore. It was a direct attack on our ability to live here. It took me a full day of painstaking work to take the motor apart, clean it, and put it back together. I did it with a cold fury burning in my chest. While I worked, Clara was on the phone with our insurance company and a lawyer she'd found who specialized in property disputes. The lawyer's advice was simple: document everything, every incident, every interaction, every piece of mail. So that's what we did. We started a war diary, a detailed log of Eleanor's campaign against us. The trail cameras became our best friends, and they paid off. About a week after the well pump, they caught the grand finale. It happened around 2 o'clock in the morning. A motion alert pinged my phone. I pulled up the live feed and saw 2 figures creeping out of the woods. They were carrying paint cans and rollers. They were dressed in dark clothes, but I could clearly see their faces. It was 2 of Eleanor's little disciples, a couple of guys I'd seen mowing the common areas. They walked right up to my beautiful cedar siding and started slapping on a thick coat of the ugliest color I have ever seen: beige. A bland, soul-crushing, HOA-approved beige. I was out the door before Clara could even say a word. I didn't shout. I just flipped on the big floodlights I'd installed. The whole area was lit up like a football stadium. The 2 guys froze like deer in the headlights, paint rollers dripping beige onto the ground. One of them was that loudmouth from the community meeting, the one who seconded all of Eleanor's insane motions. "Nice night for some painting," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "That color is called boring beige, I believe. Is it in the approved palette?" They dropped their rollers and ran. They scrambled back into the woods like the cowards they were. I didn't chase them. I didn't have to. I had it all on crystal clear, high-definition video. The next morning, I called the sheriff again. This time, I had proof. Malicious mischief, destruction of property, trespassing. The same young deputy came out. I showed him the video. He couldn't deny it this time. He looked uncomfortable. "I'll go have a talk with them," he said. "And with Mrs. Vance." But nothing happened. A week went by. The beige paint was still a giant, ugly scar on the side of my house. We got a call from the deputy. The 2 men claimed they were on HOA business, performing a mandatory aesthetic correction after we failed to respond to a notice. Eleanor backed them up, of course. She produced a fake work order. The DA, the deputy said, was unlikely to press charges because it was, once again, she said civil matter. The fines kept coming in the mail, now arriving daily. They were fining us for the unpainted beige patch on our wall. The audacity was breathtaking. Our new friend, neighbor Leo, would call us with updates. "She's telling everyone you're dangerous," he'd whisper into the phone. "That you're threatening the community's safety. She's trying to turn everyone against you before the big meeting." He told us about other people she'd bullied into submission. An old woman forced to rip out her rose garden. A family forced to rehome their dog because it barked too much. She had a history of this. We weren't the first. We were just the first to refuse to break. The final straw was the lawsuit. A courier delivered it, a stack of paper nearly 3 inches thick. Eleanor Vance and the High Pines HOA were officially suing us in civil court. They were seeking a court order to force us to comply with the covenants, pay all the fines, which were now over $20,000, and cover all of their legal fees. It was a 23-page document filled with lies and exaggerations, painting us as hostile renegades who were single-handedly destroying the fabric of their precious community. I looked at the lawsuit, then at Clara. Her face was grim. We were being backed into a corner. Eleanor was using the system against us, burying us in paperwork and legal threats, bleeding us dry. My anger had cooled into something harder and more dangerous: resolve. This was no longer just about defending our home. This was about tearing down a corrupt queen from her throne. We were losing the battle of attrition. We had to change the game. We had to find something big, something she couldn't lie or bully her way out of. That night, sitting at our kitchen table surrounded by legal papers and violation notices, Clara looked at me. There was a strange new light in her eye. "I think I found something," she said. Something she never thought we'd look for. "What did you find?" I asked, leaning forward. The table was a mess of our defense preparations, photos, timelines, and printouts of property law statutes. We were fighting a defensive war, just trying to prove we were in the right. But the look on Clara's face told me she'd just found a way to go on the attack. "I got frustrated with the county property records," she began, pushing a laptop toward me. It felt like a dead end. So, I started digging into Eleanor Vance herself, not the HOA president, the person. She tapped the screen. "Eleanor Vance is a licensed real estate agent. She owns her own little boutique agency. Vance Realty, your key to community living, is her slogan. Okay, I said, not seeing the connection yet. So, she sells houses. Makes sense. It's how she gets her claws into people. Exactly, Clara said, her voice quickening with excitement. So I started looking at her sales records. They're public information if you know where to look. For the last 2 years, Vance Realty has been very, very busy. But here's the weird part. She brought up a map on the screen. It showed the High Pines development outlined in blue. Then she added another layer to the map. Little red dots appeared all around the blue outline. Every one of these red dots is a property that her agency has bought and sold recently. I stared at the map. But they're all outside the HOA, just like us. Precisely. Clara's finger traced the line on the screen. She's been buying up distressed properties, foreclosures, estate sales, places that have been on the market for ages. She gets them for rock-bottom prices. Then her agency does a quick, cheap cosmetic makeover and flips them for a small profit. I still don't get it, Ames. She's a house flipper. So what? Don't you see? She looked at me, her eyes bright. Why would a successful real estate agent who specializes in a high-end community like High Pines be messing around with these cheap, rundown properties out in the middle of nowhere? It doesn't make sense. The profit margins are tiny. Unless her voice dropped. Unless she had a way to dramatically increase the value of all these properties at once. The pieces started clicking into place in my head. The map on the screen suddenly looked like a battle plan. The expansion, I breathed. The 1996 map. Clara nodded, a grim smile on her face. The 1996 map that she used to annex our property. Look where the new boundary line is. She traced it with her finger again. It was a wide, sweeping circle that just happened to perfectly encompass every single one of the little red dots. Our property was just the first one she came for because it was the biggest and sat right on the edge of the old boundary. It hit me like a physical blow. The sheer, diabolical brilliance of it. This was never about my fire pit. It was never about the beige paint or the trees. It wasn't even about power, not really. It was about cold, hard cash. She's using the HOA as a weapon, I said, the words tasting like poison. She's expanding the territory to pull all those cheap properties she bought into the prestigious High Pines estates. The second they're officially inside the HOA, their property values will skyrocket. She's not just flipping houses. She's flipping the whole damn neighborhood. And she's using the HOA's money to do it, Clara added, her voice filled with disgust. The legal fees for suing us, the cost of enforcing her stupid rules. It's all being paid for by the residents. She's making them fund her own personal get-rich-quick scheme. We sat in silence for a moment, letting the full weight of the discovery sink in. Eleanor Vance wasn't just a bully. She was a con artist, a fraud. She was weaponizing community covenants for personal enrichment. The lawsuit, the harassment, the constant pressure, it was all designed to make us fold or sell cheap so she could take our land and solidify her new, fraudulent boundary line. She was a predator who had disguised herself as a shepherd, and she was fleecing her own flock. This changed everything. Our fight was no longer just a personal one. It was bigger. It implicated the entire community she pretended to serve. We now had evidence that could not only win our case, but could potentially destroy her entire empire. The vague, sloppy paperwork Clara had noticed at the county office now made perfect sense. It was the work of a con artist in a hurry, trying to create a paper trail to justify a crime. The other people, I said, thinking of neighbor Leo and his garden gnome, the old woman and her roses. She's been terrorizing them for years, driving down their quality of life, making them miserable, all while she was setting up this scam. And no one ever thought to look into her business dealings, Clara said. They were too busy trying to figure out if their mailbox was the right shade of black. We now held a bomb. We had the power to not just defend ourselves, but to liberate the entire neighborhood. The question was, what were we going to do with it? My rage had transformed. It was no longer a hot, blinding fire. It was a cold, focused point of steel. I looked at the map, at the web of deceit Eleanor had woven. She thought she was a queen in her castle. She had no idea that 2 of her peasants had just found a secret tunnel right into her throne room. The game had changed. We weren't just playing defense anymore. We were about to launch a counteroffensive. We had found her weakness, and now we were going to exploit it until her whole corrupt kingdom came crashing down around her. The air in our cabin that night was thick with possibilities. We had the ammunition we needed. We could take this information to our lawyer, present it in court, and almost certainly get our case dismissed. The judge would see the clear conflict of interest. He'd rule that her actions were predatory, and our property would be declared exempt. We could win. We could go back to our quiet life on our own terms, put up a big fence, and never think about Eleanor Vance or High Pines again. It was the easy way out, the safe way out. And for a moment, it was incredibly tempting. We could just end it, I said, voicing the thought. Just save ourselves. Let the rest of them deal with her. Clara was quiet for a long time, staring out the window into the dark woods. I could see the conflict in her face. She was a pragmatist. She knew the risks of escalating things further. Going after Eleanor's real estate dealings was one thing. Trying to take down a corrupt HOA president for the good of the community was another thing entirely. That was a bigger, messier fight. Remember what Leo told us? She finally said, her voice soft. About Mrs. Hayes and her rose garden, the one her husband planted for her before he passed away. Eleanor made her rip it out because roses weren't on the approved shrubbery list. He said the old woman cried when she told him about it. I remembered. The story had made my blood boil. It was the kind of casual cruelty that defined Eleanor Vance. Petty, pointless, and designed only to remind people of her power over them. If we just save ourselves, Clara continued, turning to look at me, what happens to the next person she decides to target? What happens to Leo when his gnome offends her again? What about Mrs. Hayes? We'd be safe, yeah, but we'd be leaving them all behind, trapped in her little dictatorship. We'd be just as selfish as she is, in a way. She was right, and it was a hard truth to swallow. The core question that had been driving me, how far will a man go to defend his own, was suddenly staring me in the face with a new, more complicated challenge. Who were my own? Was it just me and Clara inside the walls of this cabin? Or did it include the decent people down the hill who were being bullied into silence? Could I live with myself, knowing I had the power to stop her and chose not to simply because it was easier? My stubbornness, the same trait that made me refuse to back down from her, now wouldn't let me walk away from this. My protective instincts, which had been focused entirely on Clara and our home, were expanding. It wasn't a conscious choice, really. It was a gut feeling. You don't let a wolf roam the pasture just because it hasn't come for your sheep yet. You deal with the wolf. No, I said, the word coming out with more force than I intended. You're right. We can't just walk away. We have to see this through. We have to burn it all down. A slow smile spread across Clara's face. It was the smile of a woman who was hoping her hot-headed husband would come to the right conclusion on his own. I was hoping you'd say that, she said, because I have a few ideas. And just like that, we crossed the line. We were no longer victims fighting back. We were strategists. We were planning a revolution. We spent the next 2 hours mapping out our plan. It had to be a two-front war. Front one was legal. We would feed this new information to our lawyer. Let him build it into our official defense. But we wouldn't reveal our whole hand yet. We'd save the knockout punch for court. Front two was a campaign of hearts and minds. We had to get the other residents on our side. Most of them were probably too scared to speak up publicly, but if we could give them the facts, we could plant the seeds of dissent. We can't put our names on it, I said. She'll just sue us for libel. We don't have to, Clara replied, already typing on her laptop. We'll write up a simple, one-page fact sheet. No opinions, just facts. Fact: Eleanor Vance's realty company has purchased 14 distressed properties bordering High Pines. Fact: the proposed HOA expansion would incorporate all 14 of these properties. Fact: the estimated value increase for these properties, if incorporated, is over $2 million. We just lay out the data and let people draw their own conclusions. And how do we get it to them? That, Clara said with a sly grin, is where neighbor Leo comes in. We made a pact that night. We were going to war, but we were going to do it her way, using the rules, the mail, and the power of information. We would be methodical. We would be relentless. I had to consciously push my anger down, lock it in a box. Rage was a blunt instrument. We needed a scalpel. This wasn't about a satisfying shouting match anymore. It was about a quiet, deliberate dismantling of her entire corrupt world. The moral crossroads was behind us. We had chosen the harder path, the one fraught with more risk, but also with the promise of real justice. It felt right. It felt necessary. As I looked at the plan we had laid out, a strange sense of calm settled over me. Eleanor Vance had wanted a fight. She had poked and prodded, thinking she would get a simple, angry reaction she could easily control. But she had miscalculated. She hadn't accounted for Clara's cleverness, and she hadn't accounted for the fact that my stubbornness, once pointed in the right direction, was a weapon she would have no defense against. She was about to find out that the man she tried to bully into submission was now coming to methodically take away everything she had. The first part of our counteroffensive began with a clandestine meeting. I met neighbor Leo at a dusty roadside diner 10 miles from town. He slid into the booth opposite me, looking around nervously as if he expected Eleanor's spies to be hiding in the salt shakers. "This feels like a spy movie," he whispered, clutching a coffee cup. "Am I going to have to eat a microfiche?" "Just a stack of flyers, Leo," I said, sliding a thick manila envelope across the table. "Can you get these into every mailbox in High Pines late at night when no one's looking?" He peeked inside the envelope, his eyes scanning the fact sheet Clara had designed. His eyebrows shot up. "Whoa," he breathed. 14 properties, $2 million. This is big. Like, really big. It's the truth, Leo. And people need to see it." He straightened up, a new resolve on his face. The quirky, paranoid neighbor was gone, replaced by a man who had just been handed a righteous cause. "Consider it done," he said, tucking the envelope inside his jacket. "Queen Eleanor's reign of terror is coming to an end." 2 days later, the fallout began. Leo called us, his voice buzzing with excitement. "It's chaos down here," he said. "People are standing in their driveways talking to each other. Actually talking. They're all holding the flyers. The community message board is on fire. Eleanor keeps deleting the posts, but new ones pop up instantly. The hornet's nest had been kicked. Eleanor, feeling her power base start to crumble, did exactly what we expected her to do. She panicked. And when she panicked, she got sloppy. Her next move was an official letter to the entire community dismissing the anonymous, slanderous lies being circulated by disgruntled elements. She claimed her real estate business was completely separate and that the expansion was for the good of the community's property values. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Her denial just made her look guiltier. Then she came for us directly. She knew we were behind it. She couldn't prove it, but she knew. And she decided to send a message. This is where things got physical. It was a Saturday afternoon. Clara was in her garden, and I was splitting firewood. A big black pickup truck, the kind with an obnoxious lift kit, came roaring up our driveway and screeched to a halt. 2 men got out. One was the goon I'd caught painting my house. The other was an even bigger guy I'd never seen before. Neither of them looked like they were there to discuss property values. I grabbed the splitting axe I was using. It felt heavy and good in my hands. I didn't raise it, just held it. "This is private property," I said, my voice low and even. "Turn around and leave." The first guy, the painter, just laughed. "We're not here to paint today, buddy. We're here on behalf of the HOA Architectural Review Committee to conduct a follow-up inspection." "I see," I said. "And he's your assistant?" I nodded at the mountain of muscle next to him. "He's security," the guy sneered. "In case of hostile residents." Clara had come over from the garden and was standing on the porch, her phone in her hand, recording everything. "You've been asked to leave," she said, her voice shaking slightly but firm. "You are trespassing." The big guy took a step toward me. "We're not leaving until we do our inspection," he growled, trying to use his size to intimidate me. He puffed out his chest and got right in my face. It was the classic bully move. That was his mistake. I didn't back down. I didn't even flinch. I just stood my ground, the axe held loosely at my side. "Take one more step onto my land," I said, looking him dead in the eye, "and I will defend my wife and my home. And I promise you, you will not like the outcome." My voice wasn't loud, but it was filled with every ounce of protective fury I had. I meant it. Every word. He hesitated. He was used to people cowering. He wasn't used to a guy holding a very large axe who looked perfectly willing to use it. The painter guy, seeing his muscle was having second thoughts, decided to change tactics. He saw the new trail camera I had installed on a tree near the driveway, a much more visible one this time. In a fit of stupid rage, he lunged for it, trying to rip it off the tree. "No more of your little spy games," he yelled. That's when I moved. I didn't go after him. I stepped in front of him, blocking his path, my body between him and the camera. He tried to shove past me, putting his hands on me. The second he made physical contact, everything changed. It was assault. He had crossed the line from trespassing to a physical attack. He pushed me again, hard. I stumbled back, but kept my footing. He raised his fist. And that was Eleanor's biggest mistake yet. Because it was all being recorded from two different angles. Clara's phone and a second hidden camera I had installed specifically for this purpose. Before he could throw the punch, the sound of a siren cut through the air. The deputy. This time, he wasn't bored. He came out of his car with his hand on his weapon. He'd clearly been told to expect trouble. My two uninvited guests froze. Their faces went from rage to panic in a split second. He attacked me. The painter yelled, pointing a trembling finger at me. Really? I said calmly. Because my wife and those two cameras have a very different version of the story. The deputy didn't even look at me. He looked at the two goons, then at the axe on the ground where I dropped it when the shoving started. He looked at Clara standing on the porch, her phone still recording. He knew exactly what had happened. This time, there was no civil matters speech. He put both of them in handcuffs. As he was leading them to his car, I knew we had her. She had overplayed her hand. She had sent her thugs, and they had gotten themselves arrested on our property, on camera. This wasn't just a win. This was the turning point of the entire war. The arrest of Eleanor's enforcers sent a shockwave through the High Pines community. It was one thing to read an anonymous flyer. It was another thing entirely to hear that the HOA had sent men to our house who ended up in the back of a police car. The narrative was shifting. We weren't the villains anymore. But Clara and I knew that while the attempted assault was a powerful piece of evidence, it wasn't the killing blow. It was proof of harassment, but Eleanor could still try to distance herself, to claim her volunteers had acted on their own. We needed something more. We needed something that tied everything together and proved the entire foundation of her claim against us was a lie. We needed a silver bullet. Clara, brilliant as ever, had an idea. Mr. Fitzwilliam, she said one evening. The man who sold us the land. You said he told you the land would never be part of the HOA. Yeah, I said. He was very clear about it. Said he'd made sure of it himself. Is he still around? She asked. I hadn't thought about him in months. He was an old man, well into his 90s when we'd met him. I did some digging and found out he was living in a quiet nursing home in the next town over. We decided to pay him a visit. We weren't sure what we'd find. We half expected to find a frail old man with a fading memory. We couldn't have been more wrong. We found Mr. Fitzwilliam sitting in a sunroom, reading a thick history book. His body was older, but his eyes were as sharp and clear as the day we met him. When I introduced myself and Clara, a slow smile spread across his wrinkled face. The cabin builders, he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. I was hoping I'd hear from you folks again. Read in the local paper you're having a little trouble with the Queen Bee down at High Pines. We spent the next hour laying out the whole story for him. The annexation notice, the 1996 map, the fines, the harassment, Eleanor's real estate scheme. He listened patiently, nodding every now and then. When we were finished, he let out a long, slow sigh. Eleanor Vance, he said, shaking his head. I remember when her family moved in. Full of vinegar, that one. Always was. He looked at me. Son, when I told you that land would never be part of the HOA, I wasn't just giving you a friendly promise. I was telling you a legal fact. He then told us a story that made the hairs on my arms stand up. Back in the early 90s, he had served on the very first board of the High Pines HOA. He was a founding member. We were just a bunch of neighbors then, he said, trying to make sure the place stayed nice. But even then, I saw how a thing like an HOA could turn sour if the wrong person got in charge. I saw the potential for bullies and tyrants. He explained that his family's farm, including the 5 acres he eventually sold to us, was an original parcel of land that predated the High Pines development by a century. When they formed the HOA, he insisted on a formal, legally binding carve-out for his property. He wanted to ensure that no future board could ever try to absorb his family's land. We had a special meeting about it in 1994, he said. The board voted unanimously to permanently exempt my parcel from any and all present or future High Pines covenants. It's in the official meeting minutes. We drew up a new map, the official 1994 development map, showing my land clearly and forever outside the boundaries. It was all signed, notarized, and filed with the county. A cold dread and a thrilling hope washed over me at the same time. Mr. Fitzwilliam, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Eleanor is using a map from 1996. It's the cornerstone of her entire lawsuit against us. This is when Mr. Fitzwilliam leaned forward, a grim, determined look in his eye. The 1996 map? He scoffed. There is number 1996 map. Not a real one, anyway. I stepped down from the board at the end of 94. That woman, Vance, she got herself elected president a year later. If she's waving around a map from 96 that shows my land inside the HOA, then she made it herself. It's a forgery. My heart was pounding in my chest. This was it. This was the silver bullet. It wasn't just a conflict of interest anymore. It wasn't just harassment. It was fraud, forgery, perjury. It was a crime. The problem, Clara said, her legal mind already seeing the obstacle, is that her forged map is the one on file at the county office. It will be her word against ours. Mr. Fitzwilliam smiled, a slow, deliberate smile. He reached over to a small side table and picked up a key. That's where you're wrong, young lady, he said. He handed the key to me. In my room, there's an old footlocker under my bed. The original, notarized 1994 map is in there. So are the official, signed meeting minutes from that vote. I never trust a copy when you can have the original. I kept them all these years. Call it a hunch. We went to his room. Under his bed was a dusty metal footlocker. I unlocked it. The air inside smelled of old paper and history. And there they were, a beautifully preserved, hand-drawn map from 1994 with the carve-out for our property clearly marked, signed by the entire original board, and bearing a crisp, clear notary seal. Beneath it was a thin folder containing the minutes of the October 1994 meeting, detailing the unanimous vote to permanently exempt the Fitzwilliam parcel. We were holding the truth in our hands, the actual, physical truth. This wasn't just evidence. It was a time bomb. Eleanor Vance had built her entire case, her entire fraudulent expansion, on a lie, and we were holding the one thing in the world that could prove it. We walked out of that nursing home not as defendants in a lawsuit, but as executioners. We had the weapon, and the trial was just 1 week away. Eleanor Vance had no idea. She was marching triumphantly toward a courtroom, completely unaware that we were about to detonate a bomb right under her throne. The day of the trial felt like the calm before a hurricane. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, a stark contrast to the storm that was about to break inside the county courthouse. Clara and I drove in silence. There was nothing left to say. We had our plan. We had our evidence. Now, we just had to execute it. Clara was wearing a simple, professional dress, looking more like a seasoned lawyer than a paralegal. I was in the only suit I owned. In my hand, I carried a single, slim leather portfolio. It felt heavier than a suitcase full of rocks. We walked into the courtroom, and there she was. Eleanor Vance was holding court in the center of the room, surrounded by her shark of a lawyer and a few of her loyal HOA cronies. She strode in wearing a hot pink blazer and skirt, the picture of authority and righteousness. When she saw us, she gave a smug, condescending smile. Her gaze fell on my single portfolio, and she smirked at her lawyer as if to say, "Look at these amateurs." Then she turned her attention to the two enormous rolling suitcases her legal team was positioning by their table. They were overflowing with binders, thousands of pages of so-called evidence against us. It was pure theater, designed to intimidate us and overwhelm the judge. The judge, a no-nonsense older woman named Judge Marian Albright, entered, and the room fell silent. Eleanor's lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Jennings, began his opening statement. He painted a masterpiece of fiction. He portrayed the High Pines HOA as a peaceful, idyllic community and Eleanor as its tireless, benevolent steward. He described us as aggressive outsiders, hostile to the very idea of community standards, who had launched a campaign of harassment against Mrs. Vance and her volunteer board members. He spoke for nearly an hour, his voice dripping with synthetic outrage. Then he called Eleanor to the stand. She was a masterful performer. She spoke in a soft, concerned voice, detailing our violations. She talked about the importance of aesthetic harmony and protecting property values. She even managed to squeeze out a few crocodile tears when she described our hostility toward her, making it sound like we were the ones terrorizing her. The climax of her testimony was the map. Her lawyer dramatically unrolled the 1996 community expansion map, and displayed it on an easel for the whole court to see. "And this document, Mrs. Vance," Mr. Jennings boomed. "This is the official map filed with the county which clearly shows the defendant's property falls within the jurisdiction of the High Pines HOA, correct?" "Yes, it is," Eleanor said, dabbing a fake tear from her eye. "We just want them to be good neighbors. That's all we've ever wanted." It was disgusting. I could feel my blood pressure rising, the hot anger I had worked so hard to contain starting to bubble up. I gripped the portfolio in my lap until my knuckles were white. Clara put a calming hand on my arm. "Wait for it," she whispered. "Let her build the pedestal higher. The fall will be that much greater." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Mr. Jennings rested his case. "The evidence is overwhelming, Your Honor," he said with a confident flourish. "We request a summary judgment in our favor." Judge Albright looked over at our table, her expression unreadable. The courtroom clock flashed 9:59 a.m. 1 minute left on the 3-minute timer. "Mr. Davis," she said to our lawyer, Mark. "Your turn." Our lawyer, a quiet, methodical man, stood up. "Thank you, Your Honor. The defense calls the defendant to the stand." I walked to the witness box, my heart hammering against my ribs. I sat down and looked directly at Eleanor. Her smug smile was still there. Mark started simply. He had me tell our story, buying the land, building the cabin, our dream of a peaceful life. Then he had me describe the first visit from Eleanor, the drone, the sabotage of our well, the paint attack, the physical confrontation. Mr. Jennings objected constantly. "Hearsay, Your Honor." Irrelevant. But the judge overruled him every time. "He's establishing a pattern of harassment, Mr. Jennings." "I'll allow it." Then Mark walked over to my portfolio. "Your Honor, the plaintiff has based their entire case on a single document, their 1996 map. We'd like to present a different map." He pulled out Mr. Fitzwilliam's 1994 map and unrolled it right next to Eleanor's. The courtroom went quiet. The two maps looked similar at first glance, but the differences were stark. Ours had the clear carve-out. Hers did not. Ours had the signatures of the original board. Hers had only one signature, Eleanor Vance, as president. "What is this?" Mr. Jennings sputtered. "Where did this come from?" "This, Mr. Jennings," Mark said, his voice ringing with authority, "is the original, notarized development map from 1994. The one your client's map is a forgery of." He then presented the signed meeting minutes proving the permanent exemption of our land. The color began to drain from Eleanor's face. Her smug smile faltered. But we weren't done. Mark then presented the evidence of her real estate fraud, the map of her purchased properties, and the projected increase in value. He presented the sheriff's reports. He played the crystal-clear video of her thugs assaulting me on my own property. The courtroom was dead silent. Every eye was on Eleanor Vance. Her mask of composure had shattered. Her face was a terrifying mixture of shock, fury, and raw, animal panic. She started to mumble, "Lies. It's all lies." Judge Albright stared at Eleanor, her eyes like chips of ice. She picked up the two maps, comparing them. She looked at the meeting minutes. She looked at the evidence of fraud. She looked at the video of the assault. She didn't need to deliberate. She picked up her gavel. The sound it made when it hit the wood was like a gunshot in the silent room. Eleanor Vance actually jumped. The showdown was over. All that was left was the sentence. "Case dismissed," Judge Albright declared, her voice echoing in the stunned silence. "With prejudice." That meant Eleanor could never bring this lawsuit against us again. Ever. But the judge was far from finished. She looked down from her bench, her gaze fixed squarely on Eleanor Vance, who looked like she might faint. "Mrs. Vance," the judge began, her tone dangerously low. "In my 20 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such a flagrant, malicious, and fraudulent abuse of the law and of a community position." She wasn't just dismissing the case. She was delivering a public condemnation. "You have terrorized these people. You have falsified official documents. You have committed perjury on the stand in my courtroom, and you have done it all for personal financial gain." The judge then turned to our lawyer. "Mr. Davis, you will prepare a full accounting of your client's legal fees and any costs associated with repairing the damage to their property. The court orders Mrs. Vance to pay every single cent of it personally, not the HOA." A gasp went through the courtroom. Eleanor's lawyer, Mr. Jennings, looked like he'd been slapped. His jaw was hanging open. But the final blow was yet to come. Judge Albright picked up the forged map and the evidence of the real estate scheme. I am referring this entire matter, the evidence of forgery, fraud, and perjury, to the district attorney's office for immediate criminal investigation. It was over. In one swift, brutal series of blows, Eleanor's entire world had been annihilated. Her lawsuit was gone. Her reputation was in ruins. She was now facing a criminal investigation that could land her in prison. As the judge slammed the gavel down one last time to adjourn, Eleanor just sat there frozen, her face a pale, slack mask of utter defeat. The aftermath was swift. That very night, an emergency meeting of the High Pines HOA was called. Neighbor Leo, no longer a quirky conspiracist but a celebrated revolutionary, led the charge. Eleanor was voted out as president in a landslide. The next week, the state real estate board, acting on the court's findings, permanently revoked her license. The residents of High Pines received a letter informing them of a new special assessment they would all have to pay, not for our costs, but to cover the tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees Eleanor had racked up with her lawyer before the trial. It was the perfect, ironic end to her reign. A few weeks later, Clara and I were back on our porch, sitting in our rocking chairs. The ugly patch of beige paint was gone, replaced by the fresh cedar I had installed myself. A small plume of smoke curled lazily up from our beautiful, unapproved fire pit. The air was clean. The trees stood tall, and in my opinion, there were just the right amount of them. It was quiet again, the deep, peaceful quiet we had fought so hard to win back. I looked over at Clara. She was smiling, a real, relaxed smile that I hadn't seen in months. We had faced the monster and won. We had answered the question of how far we would go to defend our own. We went all the way. We learned that some things, peace, freedom, the right to be left alone, are worth fighting for. And we learned that the most entitled bullies, the ones who build their kingdoms on fear and control, have the weakest foundations. All it takes is one person, or in our case, two, who are too stubborn to bow, to give it one good push and watch the whole thing crumble into dust. Control addicts and petty tyrants, beware. Some fences don't just stand their ground. Some of them bite back.